I'm very excited about this panel as well. I'm actually not an expert in supply chain, so I'm also very excited because I already learned a lot just like having an initial call with all these guys here on the panel. And it's going to be really interesting because we're not only going to talk about actual practice, circular practices in the supply chain, what are the best practices, what are the barriers, what are the drivers, but we also have a very diverse panel. So we have a lot of different sectors here. And because we don't have a lot of time, let's jump right into it with a quick overview who we have here. So right next to me, we have Jean from Xcel Industry Supplies. On one hand, providing packaging and pallets, thanks. But what is really interesting about Xcel is that they're also very much trying to drive awareness and drive the industry towards more circular practices. Then we have Dazril from Nandina REM. And it's really, what was really interesting for me, and I'm sure you will share more later, is focusing on revolutionizing the aerospace industry. We heard a lot about SAF today already, but that's now looking at decommissioned airplanes and how they can be brought back into the supply chain. Then next we have Marina from Closed Loop Fashion. So we, again, a very, very different sector, but you will see there are actually a lot of similarities in the supply chains. And Marina is focusing on bringing circularity in the textile and apparel sector. And last but not least, we have Vineet Batura, from CEO from C-Loop. And I think the speaker just before us, there were already some overlaps, are looking at maritime and looking specifically at consumables in maritime, which was to me a completely new aspect and I found extremely fascinating. So circularity in the supply chain. I'm sure everyone who is here is very familiar and very aware that we are still stuck in a linear take-make-waste system where everything is very much designed for single use. My background is a designer, so I know very much what I'm talking about. I'm part of the problem. So what I would like to start off with is getting maybe a little bit of a sensing and sharing from each of you in your sector, what is a circular supply chain for you and what role do you play in it? And maybe I'm starting off with Eugene.
Hi, good evening. I'm Jean, Managing Director of Xcel. So I'd like to thank you guys for having me here. Okay, Xcel started in the year 1992, and currently we are manufacturer of wooden pallets and solution provider for packaging. So circularity in wooden pallet industries involve moving around a traditional linear supply chain, like what you discussed, make, use, dispose, to a circular system. So we incorporate both open loop system and closed loop system. So the open loop system we actually collect recycled pellet from our customers to recycle them, reuse them, repair them, and repurpose them. So the repurposing part will be with our sister brand called Reuse, where we creative reuse of industrial waste. Then the closed loop system is we create pallets that we can actually use them in local logistic and circular them by bringing them back to our company if it's due for sort of like repair. So pallets that are made are used in your local supply chain with local logistic and reuse them until the end of life of the pallet. Yeah. Then so the open loop is when we collect back at time, we will reuse those pallets that we collect back in good condition, repair when damaged, so upcycle them when it's beyond that. Yeah, so for wooden pallets, this means ensuring they are not just single use, but rather part of a continuous supply that minimize waste and maximize value from the materials. Thank you.
Hi everyone, so I'm Dazril, I'm the COO at Nandina REM, which stands for Remanufacturing. So really happy to be here to share about what we do. In aviation, what we do is really to reclaim the high value materials from end-of-life retired aircraft. As you can imagine, I think you probably know there are a lot of aircrafts that are being retired every year. Right now, there are about 8,000 aircrafts in the boneyards. What tends to happen is that usually they'll just be crushed and they are downvalued materials. So what we do is we recover them, we separate out the different material types. It could be the metal alloys, the aluminum, titanium, and then it could be textiles like wool, polyester from the seat covers, from the carpets. And then there's also carbon fiber composite materials. So what we do is we separate out this material, ensure that they get to the right reprocessing channels, and then they are then reused in the manufacturing processes to go back. Our focus is to get it back certified to go back into aviation. First, as a first step, we're looking at getting it back into non-structural components like the cabin products. But also these materials, these circular materials can also then be used in a broader manufacturing industry like in automotives, consumer goods like luggages and things like that. So I think what we've done, we've developed a market-ready product in the form of a recovered aviation carbon fiber. This was something that we launched at the Singapore Air Show this year in collaboration with A-Star. And it has proven to have, we're able to demonstrate that it maintains, the material maintains its integrity, is also cost competitive, and it's low emissions material. So we're definitely keen to see it being used more widely in the manufacturing sector. Thank you.
Hi, hello everyone. My name is Marina Chahboune. I'm the founder of Closed Loop Fashion, which is a German-based sustainability consulting service. We operate in about 30 countries. Most of them are in Asia and North Africa. And our focus is, as introduced before, more the textile sector, and more specifically to build sustainable and circular supply chains within that sector. And what that means when we look into post-industrial waste, or back to the question of what a circular supply chain looks like, when we look into tier 4 to tier 1, we have about 47% of waste, and that is virgin raw material that we are losing throughout the process of fiber production, spinning, weaving, knitting, and then making the final garment. Most waste occurs obviously in the cutting process, which is easily 15 to up to 30% actually. So quite a lot of raw material that currently is lost in most regions where textiles are produced, simply because there is no further industry or waste management infrastructure. So what we did is about 8 years ago to develop still the industry's only textile waste management standard. We are holding that standard until today, and are also the only party authorized to verify the standard implementation. And simply because creating circularity starts with waste management and making properly managed waste accessible, and that's kind of where we start creating circular supply chains right now.
Good evening. So thank you for having me here. So unlike the very intelligent panel that I have, I'm just a humble seafarer, and that's all I know. So to me, this is to sit in any panel or go into anything that is sustainability is a learning experience. But where did my circularity or sustainability journey begin? It began from the sea. A lot of things on ships get retired because of predefined maintenance cycles, not because they're bad. It's just a written text that you will retire this at 30,000 running hours, or you will retire this at 1,000 cycles or whatever. And it's generally not bad. And even as a seafarer, when I used to sail on ships, I always felt why. And then secondly, what happens to it? From actively sailing, I went into a lot of technical ship management and commercials, but this question was never answered. And the fact of the matter is that we may pretend that we are having circularity, it's not there. It's actually not existent. And that is what compelled me to start working on something. So I saw a cup in the pantry that said that the biggest mistake that we can do is to assume that somebody else will solve our current generation's problems. So we need to take the fact that all of you, are sitting here, that means you do care for this. And that is what is needed. We cannot solve everything. There's a lot of mess that my generation has created, but we need to start doing something so that the next can completely eliminate it. So circularity is not a magic bullet. Recycling is not that one magic wand that will solve everything. C-Loop is designed to upcycle. That's our default. That if there is a material like this glass, as long as I can keep it as glass, that's the best use case. Downcycling should or be the last step. And here whenever we start about circularity, can we recycle? So that's what C-Loop is about.
Thanks a lot. Which brings me immediately to the next question. So I think what was really nice, you all shared a quick glimpse on what the current linear system within your sector, what the challenges are, like from the amount of airplanes being retired to the fact that consumables, not just in maritime, but in most industries, have planned in end of life. So how do we transition from this linear mindset, this linear way of operating, to a circular way of operating? How do we actually start to bend it down and close the loops? I mean, in our previous conversations and already before, we touched on the importance of partners, the importance of collaboration, raising awareness. Maybe, just to break the order a little bit, Marina, maybe I can start with you. What are the biggest barriers when you want to start changing the system and transitioning from linear to circular?
Okay, so specifically for the textile industry, there are so many barriers. We would still be sitting here tomorrow if we look into all of them, which basically is because textile waste or textiles today really have no value or very little value, which is different to other industry where we work with metals or higher value materials that bringing them back makes sense and is out of question. But in textiles, we work with so many cheap clothes today. You might have heard it, but the recycling industry in Europe has been screaming out loud to the European Union government to actually say the recycling industry is collapsing, because when we look into post-consumer waste like used garments, the quality that is now collected and coming back is so low that the A and B grade that you actually need to maintain a business case for recycling can no longer be maintained. And what we see right now is a shift for the recycling industry to look much more into post-industrial waste, in the production waste. But once again, what we face here is all the fiber blends. It's not a monomaterial in most cases. It's like mix of polyester with cellulosic fibers, with polyamides and so on. And that makes it really tricky, because basically for every kind of fiber position, and there are thousands, we need potentially a different type of recycling technology. And the industry has been there for a very long time. It's a heritage industry, no recycling. But that's what you also mentioned before, more like a downcycling industry, or still a lower value application industry that is mechanically recycling. Like a barrier or something that we really need to address right now is how do we uplift like that traditional recycling industry that exists to a more higher value level. That needs a lot of investments, because that means we need to shift from mechanical to chemical recycling. And that's a completely different setup. A mechanical recycling I could basically do in my living room, whereas for chemical recycling, no, you need a proper plant. There's millions and billions of investment needed to really set up these kind of infrastructures. And then once you have such a massive plant built and invested in, you need a massive amount of feedstock, which is leading us to the next thing, like accessibility to managed feedstock. And then finding the feedstock within the region where you've been building your plant is most likely not possible. So you will need to source cross-border. And that's leading us to the next challenge. That's custom regulation, import-export regulation, legislations that are currently hindering waste, because it's not defined as a material, as a raw material input, but as a waste material, which is going into legislations defining waste, and that is restricted in a lot of countries for import-export. So also obviously here we need policy work, legislations to enable that. So yeah, quite a bit of challenges that we are facing right now.
So what I'm hearing is like changes of values, changing of legislation, etc. Maybe anyone from the others that can respond to that and compare it to your sector.
So I'll just try to add a little bit here. And it resonates very well with what Marina said. If we assume this to be an environmental issue, then we are losing the battle. We need to consider this as an economic issue. Take, for example, plastics. Well, there's a lot of flack that happens for plastics. But do we envision a modern society without plastics? So while we are trying to find an alternative, well, there are some alternatives and some very interesting technologies that I've recently come across that may be able to find some solutions around those plastics, but the material is so low cost. Plastics cost less now than they were 10 years ago. So we need to consider this as an economic. So the question was, how do we change this mindset? We need to get some kind of incentivization on reduction. So that incentivization can be penal in nature, like a lot of European countries you would go, where when you buy a plastic bottle, you pay an additional top-up on that plastic bottle. And then when you deposit it back, you get that deposit back to you. So it's an incentive to do something about it. This can be at macro level, where governments, organizations, interdependent supply chains are incentivizing companies that are not just running on their OPEXs, but on working on and towards sustainability. That's where the shift will start happening.
Yeah, I'd like to add from the aerospace perspective, I think I echo a lot of what Marina and Vineet have mentioned. Especially Marina touched upon, there's a lot of, the product could be made from a mixed kind of materials. It's not really, you can imagine aircraft that are retiring these days, between 25 to 30 years old. So back then they were not really designed for circularity. So in a particular seat structure, for example, it could be mainly polycarbonate, but there are definitely inserts made of brass or metals and all that. And all of these materials have to be separated well before we can really reprocess them and maintain them at high value. And then another thing about aviation is also very highly regulated. So to be able to have circular materials at scale, there's definitely a lot of certification and regulatory pathways that have to be sort of like cleared, and these materials have to be certified to be able to be reused to ascertain that they have maintained the quality that is required to meet the safety standards. Yeah.
I'd like to share from my packaging perspective. So if you think plastic is low cost, I don't know how to talk about wood. Because when you recycle plastic, you still get paid. So when you recycle wood, we have to pay for it. So it's totally different. We pay for people to throw. Okay. So for us, for Xcel, when 20 years ago, I started embarking on recycling to our customer, so they have a lot of resistance. They say, this is a very low-cost item. Jean, why would I want to recycle them? It's so bulky. Why you want to take up my space in my warehouse? It's best that you just sell me the new ones. So it was, through a lot of persuasion, we managed to get 1 or 2 customers to do that. Then until today, so customers come to us and say, can you recycle my pallets? So things has changed. So when we start having customers wanting us to recycle their pallets, we have a constraint on our space and our labor. So space and labor constraint is very, very tedious in Singapore. It's very expensive to have a factory, to have a recycling facility in Singapore. So what we did is, yes, we did cross-border. I set up a factory in Malaysia just to do this recycling. I moved my recycled pallets to Malaysia, but I'm faced with taxes. I'm faced with a lot of licenses. So that is a challenge that we have to conquer, right? But that didn't stop us from doing that. Didn't stop us. We are still doing it, and today we are building our probably 10% of our pallets from Malaysia with all these reclaimed materials. So any pallets that can be reused in Singapore, please reuse them. We will repair them for you. Reuse them in Singapore. Those that cannot be reused in Singapore, then I will ship it out to Malaysia to salvage them. That's the goal. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. The topic of legislation came up a few times, and I definitely want to come back to that. But before that, I also want to touch on collaboration, because that's something we talked about before as well. Maybe in two parts, like looking at the complexity of supply chains, that you have like multi-actors involved, and you work across borders, across geographies. How do you go about building these new ecosystems and changing mindsets? Maybe you can share a little bit more like how you have gone about that, and maybe who the most important actors are in these new ecosystems.
So what we've done at Nandina is that we've launched a consortium called the Aviation Circularity Consortium, the ACC. It was just launched early this year. And what we have done in this consortium is that we've brought together the different stakeholders in the aerospace, aviation, and sector. So namely the OEMs, the airlines, the suppliers, as well as financial institutions. So by doing this, gathering all the stakeholders, we are creating alignment on the need for circularity in the aviation sector to really help to decarbonize this heavy to abate industry, and get everyone to realize there's a huge opportunity for us to really decarbonize by using circularity efforts. And then the other factor about having financial institutions is because we believe that there's a need for transition financing products that will help provide low-cost capital, at least for the suppliers, at least for the smaller scale suppliers, to have to be able to scale circular materials in their production at the start, at least. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, one example that comes to my mind in terms of collaboration or shifting from linear to circular, like what kind of constellations do we need? A fiber producer, which usually is also the recycler, or integrating recycling technologies in the operations, that is tier 4. And where we have the most waste in the textile industry is tier 1, the garment manufacturing process. Usually tier 1 would have absolutely no idea who was tier 4 supplier for the fabrics that they are using. They know who was the tier supplier before them, like where did they source the fabrics from, but obviously they wouldn't even know who was spinning it or producing the fiber. But now they need to talk with each other because the fiber producer needs the waste from tier 1 suppliers. So we can see a complete shift in constellations of supply chains and who needs to talk to whom, and build partnerships in terms of circulating waste materials. And that has been quite a challenge because these are players that normally did never interact with each other, nor did they have any kind of business with each other. And then in terms of collaboration, there's one thing that frustrates me a little bit, which is quite a trend in the textile industry right now, is that a lot of these recyclers that are coming up are defining themselves as innovators, or are named as innovators, but actually they are fiber producers. No, it's a recycler, and it is a normal tier 4 partner in our supply chain. And I think that is a big mistake that the chemical recyclers coming into the game right now are kind of seen as something new coming in, something outside of this whole system, being given like a kind of pedal position up there, and not being able to integrate them properly. And the thing is, we have massive fiber producers in this world. They have been there for decades. They know in absolute efficiency how to run, for example, a polyester filament production or whatever. What they maybe don't know is how to integrate innovation and how to uplift their business. So what we need is basically offtake agreements between these partners and partnerships between a recycler saying we produce only a pre-processed material. We give it to the existing supply chain to uplift them. We don't need the recyclers to become new fiber producers, right? We only need pre-processed materials that can be put into existing supply chains. Because otherwise we create such a competitive environment that is not benefiting anyone. So yeah, I think collaborations, it's extremely important, but also really how to build a beneficial collaboration, and that is inclusive and really keeping all the players in the game, yeah.
Okay, let's do something. We just had a person talk about EV boats. We had somebody talk about EV vehicles, collaboration. So one ship comes, that EV boat goes, gets the rope coils on the pallets that are supplied from her. The truck brings it to our warehouse. We process that material. We create non-woven fabric, which can then go into the textile industry. So this is collaboration in action. That can be. The problem is that we don't have a way to connect these dots yet. And you know, if one thing that we can take away from here, that the scale of the problem is so big that this cannot be solved by one person, organization, for that matter, one country. It's just within our space or within our sphere of influence, what is it that we can do that can accelerate this? That would be the best case scenario in terms of collaboration.
For our company is we not only collaborate with our customer, when we supply them new pallets, we actually look into our recycle pool of products, whether is it suitable for them to reuse. So we persistently persuade them to change from a new pallet to a recycled pallet. And we also collaborate with the waste collector. Please don't collect anything, then put them into the incinerator and burn. Give you an opportunity. Let us recycle them. So we work both ways in this manner.
I really like what you said. Like, first of all, this all resonates with you. There's collaboration, not just like in a linear way, like one hands over to the next, but really this ecosystem that we have a completely new set of. You mentioned constellation, which I think is a great term for that. And maybe also changing the role of people, like changing the way I've been doing stuff. But I want to tap on to one thing that you said, the idea of scaling, because I think what is really important to actually make change happen is that we need to scale up those all those practices. So I would like to focus in on what are actually the key things that we need to do, or what would be incentives or drivers to actually scale. And you mentioned already a few of them. You talked about financing, we talked about regulations, but maybe if we could do it around what you think is the most important driver that actually would really lead to scale.
Okay, in my book, scale will only occur when we start recognizing the problem. Like everything helps. Even if you're able to pick up, say, one plastic bottle from the beach and do something with it, that's okay. But I'll give you one example. One rope that comes on a ship is 500 kilos. One plastic bottle is 0.05 grams. So one rope is 10,000 bottles. Everybody in our room, we cannot consume 10,000 bottles in a year. So that's the scale. Now, from where we look at stuff, or what we envision, is that each ship has about 18 to 20 ropes that are retired between 3 to 5 years. And multiply that with 85,000 ships. That's the amount of consumable plastic that comes from this industry. And it's actually a lot more in a lot other industries. So when we start looking at scale, we should really look at scale. And then if you have a pile of material that needs recycling, you'll never start from the bottom. You really need to go on top. Take it from there and come downwards. That would be my take on that.
I think we mentioned the word before, but one of the biggest enablers for scaling is actually legislations. And I think we can see this as a good example right now from the European Union with the Circular Economy Action Plan that they put into legislation, and that is now coming step by step with different kind of action points into being. And one of them is that every single product entering the European Union, being imported into European Union, needs to have a certain amount of defined recycling content in it. And yeah, obviously European Union is a big market, and right now, worldwide, for example, for textile, we would not have the supply. to enable that, right? So that has been given a massive push into the recycling industry and to trust I can put investment because there is a demand. Because I think what has been holding the recycling industry back or limiting it was the massive amount of investment and then not having the commitment from the end consumer, which in the textile industry is a fashion brand, to really take the raw material later into their products and being able to supply it a price point to this, because right now recycled content is more expensive. It's going into the sustainable product ranges, and that is higher priced, and a lot of brands do not cater to this market. So we see there's one company called Xcel, which was supposed to be the most promising chemical recycler in the textile industry, and they recently went into bankruptcy simply because they couldn't make enough offtake agreements, they couldn't get enough access to waste, but most importantly, the brands that said they committed didn't take the raw materials. So they were sitting on massive stock of recycled fibers that no one would take. And I think something like this that the European Union has been introducing now in legislations making recycled content mandatory, well, then it's a fact, right? Then there's a verification that it's needed, that there is demand for it, and that I am secured as a business to put investment into it and scale these operations.
Okay. Singapore Green Plan 2030 is a very big driver for us. So a lot of companies coming to us because NEA pushing them for MPR, their mandatory packaging reporting. So all these drivers actually get all companies start to think how they can actually reduce packaging, reduce waste, and reuse them. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely think the regulatory push is very important, but at the same time, there has to be always the demonstration of the viability and feasibility of using circular supply chains. And that requires a lot of investment as well in deep tech and material science to ensure that the materials that are being reprocessed, these reclaimed materials that are being used in the remanufacturing process, they are able to be, one, meets the specifications and the performance, but also has to be cost competitive.
It's investment in R&D, it's legislation. I know we're about to jump on Q&A, but I just want to have a quick round to close because I also want to have a very clear call to action, and I don't want to be just, we'll need to wait for legislation, and until then we can't do anything. I hope we have a lot of companies here in the audience who are just waiting to get started on their sustainable supply chain journey. From each of you, what would be the first step that a company should focus on to get started? What's the most important thing to kick off beyond legislation?
I think what organizations should do is to actually start mapping out their supply chain network if they haven't done it already. And by doing so, they are able to track the material flows from source to the parts installation. And then they'll be able to understand and develop strategies for alternative sourcing strategies, and then identify the kinds of materials that they use that typically may go into the waste stream, but they could actually divert into the circular supply systems.
Okay, to wrap it up, I would like to share my company's values to be environmentally sustainable and responsible and taking pride in our action. So I believe we should make sustainability part of our mission, and we should all take accountability for our own waste.
So know your supply chain and have clear values that actually drive you. Nice.
I think it is to identify the business case for each material, product segment, industry individually, because only if you know the business case, you can create a circularity economic concept. Just want to give one very brief example. There was a very big European discounter that contacted us, and they said, we put a lot of effort and money into integrating resale in our retail stores, second-hand garments. It's a discounter. So the products, the new products they are selling are already quite low priced. And it didn't work out. So they were sitting on a lot of second-hand clothes that they had purchased, a lot of money that they had invested for, I think they have 1,500 retail stores or something to integrate these kind of resale operations. It was not a business case, because why would a consumer buy a second-hand garment in a discounter where they only pay $2-3 more for a new product? Yeah, it was simply not their business case for circularity. And I think that's a good example that not in circularity, it is very different than sustainability. Sustainability is basically a compliance application that is a standardized procedure. We can do water management, chemical management, resource management everywhere likewise, right? Like in a standardized approach. For circularity, that is simply not the case. And hence, I would say the most important to enable it, to scale it, to bring it into being is to understand for each of our industries, our products, whatever we do, what's the business case and what is really bringing this to the next level and enabling it.
Okay, I'll let you out with a secret. Maritime is an extremely regulated industry. So yes, a lot of things that do get kickstarted because of regulation, but I believe that regulation alone will not do it. It needs education. It needs mindset shift. It needs demand drivers. It needs people like us to start making some noise about it. And somehow people need to realize that we have a problem, and that problem is that we don't have a planet B. That's where it'll start really snowballing.
A lot. Do we have any questions in the audience?
I'm Cédric Guéluchon. I'm working for Amazon Last Mile Logistic, taking charge that your package are delivering at home on time. We do our best for Black Friday. But I love a lot what you say, right? And I think it has to be before a financial equation. I'm looking at it, my business, and I think, okay, my goal is to make sure I deliver on time at the best cost, the best quality, and my driver is coming every day in your home and he's leaving empty-handed, right? Now I'm thinking, I say, everybody needs to connect the dots, okay? Maybe I can do something else with my driver, right? Maybe I can pick up something at your place and bring it back to your location, right? What can we do, like, together to pilot something? Like, what is the proportion of the transportation cost which is making your equation difficult to solve that maybe we can try to solve together?
The question is to?
I think the cost of logistics for the reverse logistics, right?
Yeah, so see, there is a huge problem with reverse logistics because something that was mentioned, the regulations are quite critical in the sense that how you define waste, that is a problem. And then how do you connect? So I have a truck, suppose, for example, like actually in our company, we have she knows, we have a lot of the big warehouses in Malaysia. There's a truck that goes every day, comes to Singapore, off-lands, and then goes empty. What they do with their own initiative is different, but are we able to enable that? So if we are somehow, in a position by using deep tech, digital tools, connecting that, okay, there is something that might need to go from Tuas to say JB. That needs to get connected, and that does not exist. Same thing in maritime. A lot of material that we are off-landing. Very large cylinder liners get off-landed. Very large pumps get off-landed. So they are end of life for ships. But these are still very, very good, very resilient equipment that still can be used. But it's lying in a warehouse in Singapore. How would somebody know in, say, Thailand or somebody in say, Manila needing this pump or needing this material? How will they know? So that's what we need to somehow, figure out a platform, an exchange method of connecting this. I hope I've tried to answer.
what is really now the use case? I don't know, the question is to all of you, right? What is today your last mile challenge, right? Maybe we can try to solve something, right? Because you have some pickup point, you have people that they don't maybe they don't know, right? Like you say, we are not well connected, right? But once you connect all these people, you still transport all these goods, right? So let's imagine a world where we have this platform where everything is connected, right? You still need to bring them back to. I'm pretty sure today there is no business which can fly because just they cannot afford this transportation cost, right? But in fact, we are already every day seeing post, every day in the move like Amazon, right? We are going there, right? So if people are aware that when they get the package, they can give something back, right? I don't know what is the proportion of this opportunity, right? I have no clue.
Yeah, but it's a very pertinent question. That is the problem that we're trying to figure out. That we have a lot of material. See, if I have to transport, like we are material off takers. We have a warehouse, but this material needs to reach somewhere. How do we send it? And not just send it by just finding a logistic solution around it. It needs to be, we need to do some life cycle assessment that in the end, the material, it has to be economically viable. Then second, that it should not end up harming the environment more than, actually using new material. So these are calculations and very difficult calculations and questions that need to be answered before we can even start scratching the surface.
I think you really put the super important question here on reverse logistics, because I think that is really one of the biggest barriers we have right now to figure out how is a reverse logistic an actual business case, because the reality, at least in the industry that I'm working in, is the trucks go empty. If we look into logistics overland, they go back empty because mostly the facilities, they own the trucks and they bring the material somewhere, they drop it, and then they go back empty. And how we create a reverse logistic that maybe multiple players can use the same logistic part. Like we would need a tech solution, obviously, to coordinate this, because that's a massive coordination challenge, to say there's availability here or here, to send a truck back, to coordinate all this. But also, for example, in textiles, what is happening a lot is companies like to use their own logistics, having their own transportations, because waste is getting lost on the way. So the materials disappear from the trucks. So a lot of recyclers that we work with, we have to put GPS trackers and stuff into the trucks to ensure that the material comes from one place to another. And especially in textile, it's extremely important, because I can tell you that people know from whom the materials came. I can tell you that was H&M or that was Zara or whatever kind of brand, because we can see the prints, the colors, the embroidered materials that are hanging in all the stores. So it can be traced to them, imposing a massive risk for them to be identified. And it's happened a lot of times that H&M products were found. That was a big scandal in an environmental reservoir where trucks had just dumped it, because it was cheaper for them instead of bringing it to managed landfilling on the way, where they had to bring it. Right now, we did a big assessment in Cambodia, and we found that most of the waste is going in illegal brick as fuel in brick plants. It was not known to the facilities that it's taking a different turn and going there. And they found all the different labels of the brands, and that was obviously a big media scandal. So I think also the risk factor is very important, how to bring compliance in logistics, and how to safeguard everyone who's involved. And that's a massive amount of work to really create that, yes.
One last question. One more question. One last question.
There's one here that I'm, of course, extra interested in as a designer. What are the kind of tensions that you perceive between designing for circularity and the business profit? And maybe we can expand it a little bit, not just designing the products, but really designing the product service system. So what you mentioned, the whole supply chain, the whole closed loop. What are the tensions that you see?
I just quickly say two things. First of all, the knowledge of designers, because usually they don't have the educational background, or it's not in the educational system yet, how you design a product for circularity. But most importantly, it's the end consumer who's having certain expectations on a product. And if we look in fashion, especially since COVID, one of the biggest sectors is everything that is stretchy, very comfortable garments, meaning we need to have a lot of fiber blends, we need to have elastics in it. Already automatically it is not designed for circularity, right? But if we design a product for circularity, maybe we cannot fulfill the performance properties that a consumer is usually accustomed to, or that you feel you want to have in a product if you purchase it. So it's coming from different angles, really, if the chance to actually design for circularity.
What about any of the other sectors?
Okay, so this tension will never go away. The point is that businesses need to run for profit. So if we, again, I'll circle back to the first point I made, that if we consider all this as an environmental issue, we are not going to win this. We need to consider this as an economic issue. And so if you ask Unilever to sell less shampoo, this is not going to work. We need to somehow inculcate this education that, okay, you will sell shampoo, but it will be made of material that is biodegradable. The bottles that you use to transport that will be eco-friendly. They will be able to recycle it at the end of life. And the supply chain that you will use will be as close to carbon neutral as possible. Then we've kind of got businesses working in collaboration than in odds with the ESG people and the commercial people.
So reframing the challenge.
I have one very simple one. A stretch room, where we used to wrap our cargo. So in the past, we do about 23 to 30 micron, one roll. So right now, for sustainability, we reduce it to about 8 micron. So for the same weightage, we are getting longer length. So some of our customers telling us, so Jean, you recommend this to us, so that means we will buy less already. I say, yeah, definitely, you will buy less. So this is not good for our profit, but this is good for our branding, our brand image. To be sustainable, you have to stay true to your core.
And again, back to the values that drive your business.
I think in aviation, what we are trying to do is to simplify designs of certain things like, again, the seat structures and all that. Simplifying meaning you are using less material to achieve the same properties, for example, and also requiring lesser parts to make the seat a tray table, for example. So I think that is the way that we are looking at it. Using exploring different materials that could be cheaper, but achieving the same purpose.
Thanks a lot. Definitely, we could talk a lot longer. It's a very complex topic. We scratched the surface, but I learned a lot. I know designers have a lot to do, and so do we as consumers. Thank you.